A pleasant and wonderful day to all of us. I'm Armela Tiballa, a third year student taking a bachelor's degree in secondary education, major in English. And in this video, we'll be having an analysis on the work of Gregorio Brillantes entitled Fate, Love, Time, and Dr. Lazaro. So this is a requirement for a subject as a DENG 323 or Survey of Philippine Literature. Now for the content, we will be having a discussion on the background of the author, the summary of the story, as well as an analysis using literary elements. Now let's meet the author. Okay, Gregorio Brillantes was born in Camiling, Tarlac in 1932 and was educated at the Ateneo de Manila. He was executive editor of the Philippines Free Press and editor-in-chief of Asia Philippines Leader, and since 1972 has been an editor and writer for various other publications including Veritas News Magazine, National Midweek, and Philippine Graphic. Known as Palanca Award Hall of Famer and a multi-awarded fiction writer, is also one of the Philippines' most popular writers in English. So this writer is actually known for his sophisticated and elegant style in writing. So he often writes about individuals under 30, which is actually exemplified in the literature that we're going to discuss because the main character is in his, I think, middle or late 30s. Okay, so he writes about individuals under 30, okay, adolescents or post-adolescent ones, and those who struggle with alienation from family, society, and from themselves, okay. His earlier collection of short stories earned him the title of the Catholic writer. So he is known as the Catholic writer, okay. As you can see, we already have a brief discussion about this author, and so let's see how the style of him, how him being a Catholic writer is, or how these characteristics of him is exemplified or reflected in the literature. Okay, now let's meet the author. Okay, the author. Oh no, and then let's receive the summary. Okay. So the short story is about Dr. Lazaro, a man who is very dedicated to his passion, which is actually in medicine, okay? The story begins when Dr. Lazaro, who is sitting in upstairs veranda, receives a late night call from Pedro Esteban about a newborn with tetanus and needs an immediate help. For him, the situation is helpless, but he'll be there. So it is said that he anticipated that the situation is helpless because he is a medical practitioner, so he already anticipated it, and he knows that it will be late because you see they called him late at night, and then it is when the baby is in between life and death. So that is the situation presented in the story. So he called Ben, his son, and let him drive to a gas station near San Miguel. While on the road, he talked to Ben about his driving skills and suggests courses for the lad, including engineering and medicine. Okay? Arriving at the station, they had traveled by barefooted and took a rowboat towards Steven's house. Upon arriving, Dr. Lazaro immediately checked the baby, but he failed to save it because, again, it is already anticipated. It was very late, okay? Ben kneeled and baptized the child. Okay, sadness filled the humble abode of Esteban. Esteban gave a little amount of money and promised to pay him someday with fruits and chickens because the family is very poor that they really cannot afford a big amount to pay Dr. Lazaro. Okay, Esteban escorted them back to the car. Dr. Lazaro and Ben took the path across the fields. The subject of conversation is shifted to the baptism of the child. The two discussed God and church. Okay, Dr. Lazaro had realizations that once the beliefs never appealed to him because Dr. Lazaro himself is not a believer of church and God. Okay, but that night he felt a subtle pressure around his heart as though he had been deprived of a certain joy. So that is how the story ended. Now let's dig deeper. We'll be having the following elements. First, we have the plot, characters and characterization, the point of view, setting, conflict, literary devices, and of course, the theme used in the story. Okay. Now, for the exposition, now let's proceed to the plot. So, the characters were introduced: Dr. Lazaro, Mrs. Lazaro, Ben, and Pedro Esteban. The situation about the newborn with tetanus was mentioned immediately. So, here in the exposition, it is In the beginning, we can see how Dr. Lazaro preferred peace and oblivion as he sat gazing at the stars. So, his profession had given him too many emotions throughout the years of practice, as he was able to witness the birth of life and the darkness of death in his lifetime of medicine, so much that he developed some kind of numbness and indifference. So, in this story, we can show this as it was shown when he seemed to be irritated and impatient as he answered the phone that is when Esteban called him. Okay, it was also established that the couple wasn't particularly affectionate to each other. So that is under the exposition. So the characteristic or the character of the wife was also introduced. Like the wife was religious, and then Dr. Lazaro wasn't religious. Okay, the wife was also knitting at the time that Pedro Esteban called, and then Ben was reading a book and was called by his father to drive in. So that is for the exposition. The situation is already introduced. Now, for the rising action. It should be action, not action. Okay, so sorry for that. Okay, Dr. Lazaro and his son drove the roads to the gas station. The two had a conversation about Ben's life while he was away and the course that he must get for college. This includes engineering and medicine. Okay, Dr. Lazaro suggested this one. Dr. Lazaro suggested medicine and engineering, and Ben told that he'll have all the summer to decide. And based from the story or based from the book that Ben was reading right before his father called him, he preferred to enter the clergy, okay? Ben, just like his mother, is also active in attending Christian activities. That is for the rising action. Now for the climax, okay? For the climax, the two reach the gas station where they meet Pedro Esteban, who called in the middle of the night. That is the meeting's place, the gas station near San Miguel. Okay, they headed to the house of Esteban, but even Dr. Lazaro arrived on time. It was too late to save the baby. Okay, so um here they had to cross the river before reaching the house of Dr. Esteban, and then when Dr. Lazaro arrived on the house of Esteban, he checked the baby, but the bluish color of its face turned to gray, as is said in the story. So even though Dr. Lazaro arrived on time, so he was not able to save the baby, as Dr. Lazaro anticipated before going to the house of Esteban, because it was really late. The family called him late, and he was not able to give the right treatment because it was already late. Now for the following action, it's very sad. Dr. Lazaro said that there is nothing more that he can do. Esteban's wife began to cry, and then Ben baptized the baby because Ben himself is a very religious man. And okay, so yes, he said that there's nothing more that he can do. Okay, the room was filled with sadness. Now for the resolution, Dr. Lazaro and Ben drove back to their home. Dr. Lazaro realized that everything around him, his family, the people, his faith, love, and time were all gone. That's why we should not be surprised that the title of the story is all about the faith, love, and time of Dr. Lazaro. So, okay, the two drove back to their home. And this is mainly because his feeling of alienation is mainly because he dedicated most of his time to his family, okay? All the while, the topic of the lay baptism was discussed as they drove back to their home. So it was pretty obvious at this part that Dr. Lazaro already had an idea that his son's interest is on the clergy and not medicine. So he seemed to have found it amusing, as it was stated in the story, how he once in his childhood also believed in the power of the deity. So in the last part of this story, or yes, in the last part of the story, we will learn that Dr. Lazaro is not actually an all-time or an atheist, but he once believed in God. But there is this event wherein his eldest son died, and that is the main reason why he lost his faith in God, and also because of his profession, where he believed in methodology, on the power of science, on what is real with valid evidence. Then that is how this doctor lost his faith to God. Okay. As said in the story, at the end of the story, Dr. Lazar concluded that for certain things, like love, there was only so much time, the glimmer was lost instantly, buried in the midst of indifference. So this is exemplified because he lost everything around him. It's not literary, but it is because he dedicated much of his time to his profession, losing time for his family. That is for the resolution. Now let's meet the characters. Okay, so first let's have Dr. Lazaro. Okay, let's characterize them also. Dr. Lazaro, a country doctor, okay, lost his faith to God. His passion ate his time, and he is a dedicated man. Yes, he is a dedicated man. He's dedicated to his passion and not to his family, okay? So his profession had given him too many emotions throughout the years of practice as he was able to witness the birth of life and the darkness of death in his lifetime of medicine. Those are his experiences. So that is so much that he developed some kinds of numbness and indifference. So this was shown when he seemed to be irritated, impatient, and as he answered the phone. So, Dr. Lazar, if we're going to characterize him, he represents those people who had lost their faith because of different events that killed their hopes for possibility, and they never wanted to relive the faith that they buried just because of experiencing traumatic events. Okay? Next, let's have Ben Lazaro, a believer of God and church. Okay, so this is very contrary to his father. Okay, this young guy here who baptized the child believes in the teaching of the church. So it was also mentioned in the story that he attended mass with his mother, and he even reads a book about the story of a monk. So Ben Lazaro never wanted to have a medicine as his course as an engineer and engineering, which was actually suggested by his father. So he wanted to enter the clergy. Okay, so next let's have Mrs. Lazaro, a devoted and irreligious woman, which is actually very similar to his son. So if we're going to characterize Mrs. Lazaro, she is very distant to his husband, based on how she responds to her husband at the beginning of the story. So her distant character maybe is a result of the lack of time devoted by Dr. Lazaro to her and of course to his son. So that is the result of being a time by the profession, that the guy or Dr. Lazaro dedicated so much of his time to his profession and he never gave and or mean he failed to give time to his family. Okay, and last we have Pedro Esteban and his family, and they have high hopes for their baby. So they also represent, this family here represents people who believes in the impossible. But you see, the fact that they called Dr. Lazaro very late means that they lack the action that is supposedly intertwined with faith. So we always say that a faith without action is very dead, right? And so the consequences is that the baby died because it was too late for them to call the doctor, that the doctor supposedly you know give proper treatment immediately, but yes, in that point they failed. Okay, now let's have the points of view, which is set in limited. There is this narrator, and it is exemplified as with the use of he, she, and they. Okay. Okay. Now for the setting. Okay. The setting happens in the province of San Miguel during a night. So as you can see, this is very important. The setting is very important in communicating the events in the story to the reader. So the story happened one night in San Miguel, right? San Miguel, a province. One night in San Miguel, a province. So in this province, there is actually no good connection as suggested by the faint or choppy line when Stephen called Lazarus. So this is in the first part of the story. Okay, the people there are too religious also, that though it's not a bad thing, but as I mentioned a while back in the characters of Pedro and his family. Okay, it's not bad, but they lack the quick action to resolve a particular problem. So imagine calling a doctor when a baby is in the brink of death, late at night. Okay, definitely. Dr. Lazar could have treated the baby on time, though we cannot say if the baby would be safe or would be alive or dead also. But yes, they failed, but the doctor failed because they was late. It was too late for them to call him. Okay, this clearly tells us that people in the province turns to religion first before medicine to comfort anyone at the start of the peak of his illness. So, despite of this and of that, his encounters with the people often leaves him this methodological doctor. Okay, mesmerized at the capacity of humans to love and to forgive in the midst of death. So this is exemplified in the character of Esteban when uh, he actually thanked the doctor for arriving even at the late of the night, even though he himself is very sad with the results of the treatment or with the checkup done by the doctor. So yes, that is for the setting. So it tells also us the contrasting danger and hope when night, you see the night here, when the night kissed the people. So that is for the setting. Now let's have the conflict. It's man versus himself. Okay, it's man versus himself, and this is Dr. Lazaro versus himself. Okay, the fact that that Dr. Lazaro, the protagonist, had encountered events where he witnessed life and death on his profession, and when his eldest son died, then it killed his faith to God. So actually, there's part of the story that suggests that he is actually before a believer of the deity, but because of particular events along with his profession, then he lost his faith to God. So the conflict lies on his own thoughts. So his struggles versus his thoughts, doubts, and his own time. That is so for the conflict. That is for the conflict. Now, to further dive into the story, let's have the literary devices. First is the imagery, okay? Okay, these are just descriptions of the events in the story where it creates images in our mind if we're going to read them. Okay, for the first paragraph, from the upstairs veranda, Dr. Lazaro had a view of stars. So this is under the first part of the story actually, and stirred the plains of night that evoked gentle images and even a kind of peace in the end invisible. Dr. Lazaro remembered nothing. His mind lay untouched by any conscious thought. He was scarcely aware of the April heat. The patter of music fell around him and dissolved swiftly and properly. So this just suggests that Dr. Lazaro was sitting in the late night or in the veranda, sitting in the night or yes, without no light. Okay, so he's thinking of yes. He remembers nothing as it is said here is an image introducing Dr. Laz. Then the boat and even like in the between of them. So this is Ben and Lazaro actually treaded the road towards the home of Esteban or towards the meeting place which is the gas station. Then the road was pebbled and uneven, the car buckled slightly, and they were speeding between open fields, a succession of narrow wooden bridges breaking the crunching drive of the wheels. Dr. Lazaro gazed at the white darkness around them, the shades of trees and bushes hurling over them and sliding away, and he saw the stars, hard gleaming points of light yards, blank space, infinite distances. In the unmeasured universe, man's life flared briefly and was gone, traceless in the void. He turned away from the emptiness. So this just tells us that the two drives in the darkness with the road which is very pebbled and even, or we can say that the road is rough, right? And they are in the middle of the darkness where the light of the car only gives them this is the only source of light. So that is for the second paragraph. Third, okay, the single room contained the others he often encountered but had remained alien to, stirring an impersonal disgust. The surge decayed, the smells of the unaired sick. An old woman greeted him, lisping incoherently. A woman, the grandmother, sat crouched in a corner, beneath a frame pint of the Mother of Perpetual Help. A boy about 10 slept sprawled on a mat. Esteban's wife, pale and thin, lay on the floor with the sick child beside her. So this is now a description of the family of Pedro Esteban. This is the event, or this is the image that the authors want to portray as how poor these people or how poor the place is. So this is in the point of view of Dr. Lazaro. Okay? I mean, this is no, it's not the point of view of Dr. Lazaro, but this is how the situation or how hard the situation of the family of Esteban was, suggesting that they are very poor. Now for the symbols. Okay, for the symbols, we have here the first one, darkness or loss of light. So the author used darkness all throughout the story from the beginning and until the end. So Dr. Lazaro's life has been devoid with light because of the events that created a distance between him and his family, which also made him doubt his faith to God. That is for the first one. Next, for the flashlight. So this tool was used when Dr. Lazaro trailed the road going to Steven's house. The road was flooded with darkness, and the flashlight allowed Dr. Lazaro, his son, and Steven to be able to walk and cross a river just to save a baby's life. So this flashlight represents the faith and hope of Steven and cling to the impossible. So the flashlight used amidst the dark. The flashlight is used in the darkness. Okay. Third, we have the cave of S7's house. This is a symbol used to portray the poverty or the yes, suggesting that the family of Esteban is very poor. Okay, and last we have here the Adam and Apple. So there's this line in the a story when Dr. Lazarus said, "There's disease, suffering, death because Adam ate the apple," and that is in the first part of the story, so or in the first paragraph of the story. So, biblically, when Adam ate the apple, he and his wife immediately suffered from imperfection, right? Where death follows human, and no one can avoid as such. So, the statement of Dr. Lazaro pertains to the inevitable death that humans inherited from the sin of Adam, and so this is very true because the baby, despite of giving it a treatment, died inevitably. Okay? Next, let's have this irony. Okay, Doctor it is ironic in the part of Dr. Lazarus because Lazarus' name was derived from the Bible, but he is not a believer of God. So if we remember in the Bible, we have Lazarus, the friend of Lazarus, the friend of Jesus. He is very devout or yes, a believer of God. But this is very ironic in the part of Dr. Lazarus, who is not a believer of God. Now let's have the themes. First is faith allows people to believe in the impossible. So this is very true in the characters of the family of Stephen. So vice versa, lack of faith deprives people to believe on what is possible. Okay. Next is science and faith are two opposing forces because science relies on what is based on concrete evidence as well. And faith, this just gives you the hope to cling on what is not intangible, but but faith is actually inside your heart, or yes, it lives inside our heart and not on tangible things. Okay. Next, love requires the force of time. So this is very true in the character of Dr. Lazaro. Okay, he failed to show the love to his family because he devoted much of his time to his profession. Okay, he lacks the time that is needed. Okay, now for the conclusion. Okay, so actually, this literature is a great work because it undergoes a test of time and it's relevant. It is still timely even though it was written decades ago. So in the midst of modernity, there are still remote places that are deprived of this advancement, where people doesn't have a good access to medicine. Many people struggle from limited medicine tools. There are few doctors and nurses to attend to health concerns. So remoteness is one of the problems and becomes severe due to the gripping force of poverty. So Dr. Lazaro, despite of his age, is called in the middle of the night to care for an infant of poor health. Okay, it is evident that at first he was reluctant to comply, thinking why not make the younger doctors take care of the sick, that is in the story. Thus, his action let us realize that doctors are duly committed professionals who are driven by their sense of duty and attend to the concerns of people, no matter the place or difficult or how difficult or impossible the situation is. So, this story also tells us the difficult situation of being put between life and death. For Dr. Lazaro, it killed his faith. He encounters this situation on a regular basis, but he commands a faith exemplified by the family of Pedro of clinging to the impossible even though they lack quick action. Finally, this story reminds me of keeping the faith alive on my heart, no matter how dire the situation is. So, like Dr. Lazaro, there are circumstances that may kill the faith I have developed from studying the Bible ever since I was young. There may be waves of chaos that may torment me one day, that may haunt me and the important people around me. A strong wind may shake my hopes, but the faith I have will keep me from falling and prevent me from losing my trust on God. His promise of resurrection keeps my faith alive, and with this, I am confident that whatever task that the old system of things might bring, soon everything will fall into the right place in according to the original plan of God. So much for that conclusion. It just actually has a touch of, reader response approach. Okay, so that ends my discussion. Thank you for listening.